All right. Good afternoon, everybody, and welcome for those of you who are just joining us, which should be everybody. We're just getting started. My name is Henry Monahan, and if you have not had a chance to work with Kathy Wilson, I've got Kathy Wilson joining us. She is on our under 65 team and has more experience than I think any one of us will ever get in terms of doing events in the field and grassroots marketing. And that's what we're here to talk about today, is specifically grassroots marketing, how it can help you grow your business, and why you should be doing it, even if not exclusively, why it should be at least a part of your marketing funnel. So before we get started, I'm going to go ahead and kind of talk about a couple rudimentary or kind of things that we probably all know as agents, but it's always good to kind of revisit. And at the end of the day, the two things I want to start with are sales is a numbers game. The more people you get in touch with, the more people you build relationships with, the more people that know what you do, the more sales you're going to get. And the second thing is one of the great things about grassroots marketing. And I think in a world where gas is, I think I saw this afternoon, we're 59 here in Fort Myers, Florida. I know we've got folks on here probably from all over the country. Money's tight, not just for individuals, but it's tight for us as business owners as well. And we got to make sure that we stretch our marketing dollars as far as they'll go. Grassroots marketing and community engagement is one of the least expensive in terms of dollar spend marketing funnels that we can generate. But what it takes in place of that is time. And it takes time to get out there in the field, to build relationships with entities that'll let you come in and do presentations, food pantries, senior centers, all those type of groups. But the payoff is you build relationships. And Kathy, one of the questions I have here that I really wanted to ask you is I know you've been out in the field not just as uh, a core with United Healthcare, building and kind of creating some of these community events, but I know you've been out in the field in the past as an agent as well. What can you tell me about your experience building relationships, and how many of your clients can you think of that were the result of the relationships you built out in the field?
Well, that's kind of a loaded question, but first of all, thanks for having me on here. I'd love to talk about grassroots. It's kind of my specialty. It's my go-to. I've never paid for a lead, and all I'd say 70% because 30% are friends of friends or acquaintances that knew what I was doing in the business and are my clients, but 70% have been from grassroots marketing because what we do is relationships, right? And that's where you're building those relationships. These are your friends now.
Excellent. And I think you bring up a really good point. It's we can all want to be, and that's certainly a place to strive for, where all of our leads and our new business is coming in either from referrals or from the grassroots events we're doing. But even if we're not there, even if we're in a place where we're still doing mailers, and there's certainly nothing wrong, there's some places where those perform tremendously well. I would say down here, I do know a couple folks that I saw on the list that were going to be joining us, our fellow residents of the Gulf Coast here in the west coast of Florida. I still don't think we've come out of a place where after 2022, when we got absolutely smacked with that hurricane season, where mailers have been successful. And for us, it was just the deluge of everything else outside of insurance that people are getting marketed with. Now, property and casualty folks were sending email, roofers, contractors, screen repair people, the world. So there's places where mailers may not be successful. But the point I think is important is I think grassroots has a place in everybody's marketing funnel, because at the end of the day, everything you do, whether it's seminars, direct mailers, pay per lead, even grassroots, any given month, you're going to see some of them, of those funnels be successful, some not. So if you're not at least trying to get out there in the field, not at least including some of these different type of events, you're kind of missing out. So that kind of segues me into one of the first things I want to talk about are community type events, kind of civic organizations. So Elks clubs, moose clubs, charities, heart walks. Kathy, I can share one of the stories about one of my favorite type of charity events that I've worked. I know you've probably worked some in the past. Do you have any offhand that you feel like sharing?
Well, what comes to mind is, I come from the nonprofit world, which has put me in the perfect lining for community-based organizations, and when you hear CBOs, it's like, what does that mean, you know? It means anything, any entity and groups that gather together who do community events. So don't forget about your festivals. The YMCA in Jacksonville, where I used to live, had a huge, it's called the Johnson Reunion. And that was a great sales opportunity for us. So, all of your festivals, now that I've moved out to Tennessee, there are festivals every weekend. The Pickle Festival, the Strawberry Festival. Don't forget about your fairs. Those are great opportunities where you will see the elderly come out and be able to participate and be able to stop at your booth. And so, also it's important about what you have at your booth so you can attract that demographic.
Excellent. So one of the things that I think is really interesting, I kind of want to dive into is you're absolutely right. There's fairs for practically everything. There's an agency that we worked with down here a couple years ago that got really big into boat shows. I was just curious. I said, Greg, how did you come across these boat shows that you're working with? He said, honestly, I didn't try to make it too complicated. I just Googled boat shows in Fort Myers and tried to get myself in, worked with the people who were hosting them over the next 3 or 4 months. How do you, the festivals that you did, how did you find them and how did you actually go about finding events? Is it more complicated than that, or is it that easy just looking and see what's going on and knowing what's going on in your market?
It's that easy. It's as if you were looking for a festival or event to go to. And when you see that post on Facebook or what you might be looking at, there's usually a vendors needed and you have a number to call. It's business to business, individuals contacting individuals. And depending on where you live, if it's a metro city or a small rural area, see if you fit in as their vendor. And maybe they've never had a vendor like you, and it's not always the best to come in as your broker sales rep, right? You want to be able to, if it's a strawberry festival, maybe you have something as strawberries that you're giving out as well so that you can fit into the theme and don't look so sales insurance rep ish.
I like that. One of the trainings that I attended that Kathy did that was phenomenal was actual training on how to set up your table at some of these different types of venues. So if you're at a farmer's market or a food pantry, and you've put more thought than anybody I've ever talked to about the type of things you give away at these events, and even more so, what type of price point per individual item you should be shooting for, and where to go to hit that particular price point. Can I get you to elaborate a little bit on that? Because I love hearing you talk about that. There's so much thought that goes into planning events, and I love hearing what you have to say about it.
Yeah. So in my training, I always start off with brokers are broke until we're not, right? So when we start off, you're like, how am I going to afford 100 X whatever you're gonna do at your tabletop, where you can give away pens, you can give away little brochures and things, but what's gonna make you memorable and what are they going to come up to your table for? So, since we don't have a lot of money, especially when we're starting out, and even if we do, we don't wanna spend hundreds of dollars just to do a tabletop.
Not at
Uh,
four fifty
you
nine a
know,
gallon.
at $4.59 a gallon, someone posted in California is going up to $7.
Oh, my
Uh,
heart is actually
I
on.
know, it's starting to hurt. So, the dollar store is $1.25. So bulk is your friend, and if you can source those somewhere online or Costco or wherever, we wanna stay under a dollar. And I don't know if you remember, when we had first started and I was out canvassing and doing grassroots with a lot of
Mhm.
agents. Do you remember there was stacks of toilet paper or maybe
And
tortilla
tortilla
chips?
chips.
Get things from all over places. The tortilla chips came from a church that we were setting up with for a food drive, and they just have a generous heart and tons of stuff, and we're like, "Please take this." So we took that and ran with it because we used it for our next events and more, and so that cost us nothing. And then you have your, not to go on and on, but remember you have your partners, you have your doctor's offices, you have your carrier reps, and you have JSA. So you're not alone trying to figure out how to afford what you need for a table setup or grassroots.
Absolutely. And I do wanna, position each of the sales teams on a regional level. Certainly Kathy and her team for the under 65 market. I'm sure we have folks on this call from all over the country. In on your sales teams that you work with, Taylor's team over on the West Coast, Bill up in Wisconsin and his team, and then Jacob and the folks out of Texas, and of course myself and the team I have, Catalina, Robert, and Matt, Florida on up to Maine. Having the ability to reach out to the team and the territory you're in, who's going to know your market and can help you find events and kind of know what type of things get attended. I think there's a phenomenal value to that. And there's a quote that Zonta Turner used to use. We've worked with her a while, and if you haven't had a chance to hear her speak, she's another absolute powerhouse. I'm going to make sure I get this right, Kathy. You got to go after prospects where they eat, where they play, where they pray, and where they live, right?
Eat,
Being
sleep, right?
where your ideal client is. And that's actually something I kind of want to have everybody think about. I know we're talking about grassroots, but when we're talking about where we want to go for events, we want to go where our ideal clients are. Everybody's ideal client in here is going to be a little bit different. Now, on the surface, maybe it's I want to work with everybody who's turning 65. Well, maybe that's the case. Maybe you actually want to focus on a niche market. You maybe want to focus on folks that are turning 65, but you're also doing other lines. You may want to focus on folks turning 65 that have a certain income. Maybe there's something unique about you. One of the best places I used to do events when I was in a life and annuity world was the local Corvette club. I had my midlife crisis early on in my life, and I about 28 years old. I was doing well in that space, and I bought a '98 cherry red Corvette. Got my first fender bender 2 weeks in, but the principal I worked for at the time said, "Henry, you need to join the Corvette club." I'm like, "Nah, it's a bunch of older guys, and they're all going to be full of themselves." And then he said, "Who's your ideal client?" I'm like, "Older gentlemen that have money to invest." Could any other agent have probably networked in there? No, it was something unique that I had. So everybody on here, I imagine there's something unique as an agent, or there's a community that you may have access to based on your hobbies or your background that another agent may not have access to. I would say think of those things. When we do our follow-up email, one of the things that I'm going to send out is we're not doing slides today because I think being able to just have a conversation, I think there's going to be more value coming out of that. But one of the slides from the presentation we've done in the past has a whole slew of different types of events and places you can go. And I was joking about this with Kathy when we were talking a little bit earlier. One of the names or one of the types of events that was on there was tea parties. And I always laughed at that. I've made fun of that for years. Kathy, just out of curiosity, have you ever done an event as a tea party?
Many times.
Really?
Yeah.
So you know what I didn't know.
And I know what you're gonna say, but the other groups that do tea parties are your church ladies, are your moms, are your grandparents' days.
Or red
Yeah.
hat lady.
Red
So
hat ladies, yeah.
so the takeaway is I'm not gonna say think outside the box, I think that's an overused cliche, but don't be afraid to try something different. So I personally have never done events as a tea party, but one of the most interesting client appreciation events that was used as a way to get referrals and bring people in was an agent that I worked with, and he did a fan boat trip out in the Florida Everglades for all of his clients. And I would have never thought that getting a whole bunch of seniors going out into the Everglades in the middle of June or July, I never thought that would have been an enjoyable time. I figured that would have been hot, sweaty, they wouldn't have enjoyed it. But you know what? They had a blast, and he got 5 or 6 new clients out of that, and as an annuity advisor, that's a pretty big deal. I think even as a Medicare advisor, if we can do one event and get 5 or 6 clients, we'd consider that a success.
Yeah, so that paid for his boat trip, right? He can write that
Exactly.
off. There's agents who have done car shows and bought a antique car for the car show popped open the truck, and that's where his booth was,
Yep.
and was able to write that off, right?
I've got an agent. I don't know, Jack, if you're on the call. I thought you might have registered. One of our agents up in northern Florida does that exact same thing. And about 2 years ago, we actually helped him out with, I want to say it was customized detailing cloths. But there's a lot of really cool stuff. Again, don't necessarily think outside of the box, but be open to trying new things. I think the tried and true things, bingo nights, ice cream socials, senior lunches, movie nights, there's always going to be a place for them. There's always going to be a place for farmers markets, especially for some of our northern folks where it's starting to get warmer. Maybe I think we're spoiled in some of the southern places where we've got access to that year round, but it's starting to get warmer up north, so those are starting to open up. And there's always going to be a place for food pantries. And Kathy, I know you were instrumental for helping us get a lot of agents into food pantries right after the hurricane. Um, uh, Kind of bounce something off you. What has your experience been with food pantries post COVID? I know during COVID, a lot of them kind of adopted the drive through model. How has that market been since? And you see things opening up and being a little more easy to work with?
So you're right. A lot of things did pivot to the drive-through model, and that is not as successful. It really depends on the venue, the community that you're working with, the location, the volunteers, and things like that to coordinate where you could, because location is so important, especially in the drive-throughs. We haven't had the success like we had in the past with a walk-up, but the good news is a lot of food pantries are going back to walk up. So you've got those drive-throughs that are efficient. And you know what? Good for them. They serve a purpose and they can serve a lot more people efficiently than before. That's not to our benefit because we actually need that one-on-one interaction, and you don't get that with people in the car. You could get maybe 1 or 2, and you know what? My brain's still thinking about that because I encounter it a lot, trying to figure out what marketing piece is gonna stick, you know, without tricking them and saying, "Win a prize if you call this number." But what is it that's gonna make someone who drives by give you a call? When I figure that out, I will let you know, but it's walk up still work 100%.
So I'll tell you what the feedback I've gotten from folks that have been doing things like boat shows, RV shows, and even craft fairs. Full size candy bars get people's attention.
How
I
about
always
that?
used to have a, a point. I think it's kind of followed me. I made the comment at our 50th anniversary. Food makes friends. You'd be surprised how much traction you can get if you're giving away food, how much attention you'll get. So I think there's something to be said. And again, if we're looking at price per giveaway, you can come away from like a Costco or a Sam's Club or a wholesale outlet fairly inexpensive with full size candy bars. I have had agents get a bit of guff from folks that are diabetic. I think that's going to be few and far between.
We just had a comment, some people have had good luck at the drive-throughs, and that's wonderful. Please share your secrets if you get it. And it's everybody's different. And, everybody is going to have a different type of event depending on who you are, what your talents are, what your personality is. And it's going to work for some better than others. So you've got to try a lot of different things.
Yep. And I think the good thing is at least if you try one of these food pantries or you try a couple events and you're very, very passionate about the fact that consistency is key. I think that's the next thing I want to kind of cover. But even if you do a couple events and you say, you know what, this isn't working, you can pivot to something else. There's nothing saying you have to do the same thing if it's not working. And in most cases, the only thing you've invested is time. So it's not the same as if you have uh, a couple thousand piece mailer that goes out and it just doesn't resonate with people and you're out the cost of the mailer. Or if you do a round of dinner seminars and nobody shows up. This you can pivot fairly quickly and easily to something that may be a little bit more successful. But tell me a little bit about consistency because I know that's one of the challenges some agents face is they do get discouraged if they go to their first, say we're doing a food pantry or their first event and they don't get any permission to contacts or they only get one. Tell me about why consistency is important.
But it's extremely important because we're heading into May right now. If you haven't started already, now is the time because October is going to be here before you know it. And who wants to do business with someone they've seen one time? It happens. It happens quite often. I've had a lot of success with that because I can be relationable in the moment and build that relationship. But wouldn't you rather buy from someone or do business that you've seen 7, 8, 9, 10 times? And so the first couple of times could be discouraging. Don't expect to sell though. I always say, you're the mayor, go in and make friends. You need to get votes, right? So without
Yep.
building relationships and making connections with people, I wouldn't even expect to get anything.
And I want to say there's constantly changing sales statistics, but I know the one of them that's fairly consistent is there's some surprisingly high number. I want to say it's 78% of individuals, they won't make a buying decision until they've seen you, interacted with you, whether that's
Sure.
seen a Facebook post, met you in person, had a phone call, or had at least 3 interactions. So if you're expecting to show up and at your first event, just knock it out of the park, and you're not gonna go back because you didn't get 8 cases out of it or 8 referrals or pieces of business, know that it comes, you just have to be consistent. And the flip side to that is you're not just building relationships with prospects, you're building relationships with the venue itself, right?
Yeah. And to show up when you say you're going to come, right? And to be
Yes,
consistent.
absolutely.
They rely on you too, and nobody wants egg on their face when one party or the other doesn't show or hold up to their commitment. And just to quickly leave you with 2 quick ideas that are very, very successful. One is a produce stand. You can buy a bag of 3 bags of each, apples, sweet potatoes, onions, whatever it is. It'll cost you probably $50. You put them in baskets. You go to apartment complex with their permission, of course, and you're saying, "Hey, I offer a produce stand." So as they come, you bag 1 of each item of maybe 6 or 7 different options into the bag while you're having a conversation with them. So it's not like a come and shop. We're talking about individual seniors. That's all they need anyways. And another one is to throw a birthday party. So if you're working with groups, we you can tell the apartment complex we host birthday parties. We'll bring the birthday cake, maybe a paint and sip and a present and invite 10 of your friends. Wouldn't you like to have 10 seniors that you've never met before? And that's been pretty successful because it leads to other things.
Excellent. I think we're getting towards the end of our half hour that we had carved out. The last thing, there's 2 things I want to talk about. One is, so what's the value? You mentioned, you're providing value to the apartment complex. What is the value you bring to whoever you're doing? So if you're working with a food pantry or with a senior center, any of these places where people are already gathered, not necessarily a festival, if you're working with someone you would consider, say, a community partner, think about that as you're approaching them when you're doing the initial approach. Because if you approach from a mindset of you're there to prospect and get clients, people can smell a salesperson coming a mile away,
Mhm.
and you're going to lose your ability to get in that relationship. But if you go there with a mindset, you're here to help their members, their residents, make sure that they have their health questions answered, to make sure that they're assisted in those insurance needs, that you're providing a value. It's not just a one-way relationship. That's going to give you a much better starting point for that relationship.
Yeah, you wanna be a resource, and so as you're there, you start learning things about the community. When I first moved to somewhere, I'm just volunteering actually. I haven't even thought about sales a couple months because I'm embedding myself into the community by volunteering and finding out where the needs are and where are people getting their help right now. And when you're there, you are now a resource on site that can help everybody, figure out how to figure things out.
Excellent. And the last thing I'm going to go over, and it's one of my favorite quotes from a friend of long, long ago. So we've done our grassroots marketing event. We've done let's say we went to the Mango Festival here in Fort Myers, Florida. We had a blast. We got a whole bunch of permission to contact cards,
Mhm.
and we've got folks that have our contact information and they're reaching out. How do we help them? How do we make sure that we get the most out of them? And aside from doing our job as agents, one of the best lines I ever heard from somebody I worked with was a gentleman who was just absolutely phenomenal at creating referrals from existing clients. And I said, Mike, how do you do it? I mean, you get more referrals than anybody I know, and you build relationships in such a strong, positive way. And he was kind of smug and silly about it, but I think it really made sense. He said, "It's not rocket science. I'm likable. I'm easy to work with." I think his exact words were, "I'm nice. I smell good. I answer the phone." So that's again kind of bringing this all back together. Doing the events and reaching out to people is part of the story. Being accessible and just being someone who they want to have a relationship with, who they want to work with is key.
Yeah, I agree to that 100%. And follow up, right, after you've
Yep.
met them at the event. I can't tell you how many times, because guess what? Events are exhausting. You're on, you're labored, and when you get home, that's not ideal where you have all this energy to call people, but you've got to. You're gonna lose the sale, and I can't tell you how many times because I didn't feel like it, I was too burnt out, but you just gotta push through because it is successful and the fruit's there to get.
So the last thing I'll say, and if this is something you want to do and you want to partner with or reach out to anybody on the sales team in the territory you're in, give them a shout. We'd love to help you find some events that make sense. The one thing on behalf of everybody that I'm going to ask you to do is track your results. Kathy, I know when in your previous role, were they pretty focused on making sure you tracked results?
Oh, 100%, especially at United Healthcare.
Yep. And there's a reason why. At the end of the day, we talked about how you can pivot away from something if it's not working, but you don't necessarily know if it's not working right away. Ideally, what you should be able to do is whether it's after AEP, before AEP, as you're doing your kind of planning, at some point, you should be able to sit down and look at the last 6 months, 9 months, 12 months, whatever the time period is, and go, these are the events I did. This is how much I got out of it. This is what I didn't get. This is how much time I spent. This is how much money I spent. And find out what your cost per acquisition for the clients that you got was, not just necessarily on how much money you spent, but how much time did you spend? Because at the end of the day, we've got finite amounts of both. If you're spending too much of one and it's not working, like I said, don't be afraid to try something different. There's so many options out there. The team here at JSA, we'd love to have conversations on what unique options may be right for you. I think that gets us right to the 4:30 mark. I don't have anywhere to go, so I'm willing to spend a little bit extra time. And if we go past time and you have to leave, great. But I do want to head over to the chat because I'm sure there's some folks that got some questions. Do you feel like taking a few questions, Kathy?
Sure.
Let's see what we got.
Gas is high, yep. So Melanie had mentioned that walk-ups would walk away when she was preoccupied, and that's 100 that's so true. Learning how to manage the line, and it's just part of the game, and that's why it's important to be there time and time again, because you're not gonna catch everybody. Thank God there's enough business for all of us to share. So you've gotta go back to catch the rest, right?
Yep. And that just that I think illustrates the fact that, like you said, being there and being consistent. Because there's folks that may not even approach you the first time or the second time they see you. And I saw somebody made a comment that it's now up to 8. I think each time you interact with someone, they become a little bit more statistically likely to do business with you. But you're right. I want to say there's some statistical amount. And again, it's in the slide. Shame on me for not remembering it. But that it will take 6, 7, 8 times before they even remotely consider doing business with you.
For sure. And yes, rolls of toilet paper from Melanie, that works very well. Everywhere I go, I do toilet paper or detergent boxes. I don't care the demographic, the income, the venue, it works.
I just saw a comment from a good friend of mine, Mr. Anthony Caparasso. Yeah, it does take you're
Yeah.
absolutely right. It does take a little bit of time, but there's a lot of events out there that you can do really, really well. I won't spill your trade secret, Anthony, but I know you just had an event here a couple weeks ago that you did phenomenal at.
So, bottom line, now is the time. We want to try to teach you how to fish, and that was the one important thing when I was at as a core with United Healthcare. I could do it for you all day because I know it like the back of my hand, but I've got to teach you how to do it because I can't be there all the time, and I shouldn't have to be. This is your business. You can own it and empower yourself to do that. And so now is the time to cast that line so we can get some fish in October.
Well, excellent. Well, to everybody who took the time to join us on a Tuesday afternoon, I thank you on behalf of all of JSA and all of the regional sales teams and the under 65 team. Please reach out to us if there's something we can help you with. I think we all love kind of collecting unique and cool events that we've helped agents with. So we'd love for yours to be the next one we help with.
Thanks so much, Henry.
All right. Take care, everybody.